Okay, I'll try again. Morning, everyone. I'm Michelle Louw. I'm here representing Intelact Beef from South Africa. Just to give a bit of background, so studied at University of Pretoria, wanting to be large stock vet, life had other plans, and I ended up finishing with my animal science degree with honours and focusing more on animal nutrition. Did a year or two of poultry, realized I don't like a chicken. I do prefer birds, so I branched off that way. Yeah, and then I worked for about 8 years or so for a feed company called De Haas, which is also an international company. And then, I just needed to find some differences, I think. I think nutrition was quite good, but it can get quite mundane. And I liked looking at the bigger scheme of things, like what goes into a beef food. And the opportunity at Intelact Beef came up, and I grabbed it with both hands. So then just to get back to Intelact. So Intelact is a business consulting company. It's an international company originating from New Zealand and Australia. In the early 2000s, Jane Holiday and I think Anton Benta bought the franchise out into South Africa and started consulting for the dairy farmers. We saw how it revolutionized the dairy farming industry, and in 2021 we decided to start up on the beef and hopefully getting our beef farmers driving forward in progress and profitability. So how we do it is sorry, no, but no, too little. Here we go. Okay, so what we do as Intelact V for Intelact Dairy, if we use of certain tools where we like benchmarking or herd tracking or financial tracking, and we look at everything from the ground up. So it's what your farm can produce, how your animals perform, and what's happening in your bank account. And we marry everything together to try and identify weaknesses and strengths. We then look at those weaknesses and strengths, and we set up plans or strategies to help you to become a better farmer within your system. With benchmarking, you can also compare yourself to other like-minded producers or other, like we call them peers. So if you're semi-intensive, to compare to other semi-intensive and extensive versus extensive. And then you can also compare yourself to past performances. We also then host an annual conference where we get in speakers like today to come and expand on their knowledge to our farmers. And we also do benchmarking workshops. So once we've run the herd figures, we then invite all the farmers to come and discuss the figures and to learn from each other and see what the industry is doing as well. What have we found are the key profit drivers for that year? Interestingly enough, over the past 5 years, every year has presented a different key profit driver in the beef industry based on markets as well as the environment. We also then host 4 farm walks a year, so that's where we ask one of our clients to host a day, and very informal. We then present his data, and it's an open discussion after that, and creates a lot of learning as well. Okay, so that's basically in short what you do at Intelact B. If you guys want to know anything more, I'm here the whole day, so let's go breathe. Now let's move on to why we're actually here. So to decide if we're really going to spend that 100,000 kwacha on a bull or not. They're out. If we look at this bull, who would buy this bull? Money is not an option. You really like this bull. Put your hands up. Who would buy this bull? Nobody. Oh my goodness. The guy who did buy this bull, very upset with Louw. And this bull? Those are not very good bull buys. What about this bull? Oh. You guys laugh, but if you actually look into the rodeo bulls, you actually realize how functional these bulls are, how balanced these bulls are, and believe it or not, what good temperament these bulls have. And they do go for a lot of money, but we'll get to that later. So when we look at a bull, we need to understand one thing. we need to understand that he is the single biggest, most influential animal on our farm and in our herd. If you compare it to a cow that breeds one calf per year, he's siring up to 25 to even 30 calves per year in your herd. If we look at the last 3 generations of our heifers that we've retained, 87% of their genetics can be tied back into the last 3 bulls you bought. So it's very important to make sure that the bull you keep or the bull you buy is the right bull to take you to the next step in your herd. Who knows this tractor from Clarkson Farming? The big fancy Lamborghini he bought because it was very cool. How functional was this tractor on his farm? And how many times did he use this tractor just because it was there, but it wasn't quite as functional as he had hoped? And that's the same concept we need to look at our bulls. Because it's big and fancy doesn't mean it's going to be functional. And oftentimes when we buy that big fancy bull, we do use him because he's there. He can't just eat grass in a paddock and do nothing. And how many times have we had to cull that bull and all his progeny out because it was just the wrong bull we bought? So that brings me to what we'll go into today. So walking away from this day, I would like you guys to keep 3 things in mind when you start looking at bull buying. You need to know what the genetics of your herd is. How is your herd performing? You need to then focus on the traits that's profitable to you. And then you need to know how much are you prepared to spend on the bull and still break even at the end of the day. Okay, step 1. We need to create this wanted ad. We need to know where we fit in the market. Are we weaner producers? Are we withholding weaners and selling slaughter stock to feedlots or to the butcheries? So where we fit in the market. We need to know the exact performance of our cows. What is our conception rates? What are our weaning rates? What are our weaning weights? And then also we need to make sure that our herd goals align with the seller's herd goals. Doesn't help you are focusing on calving ease, but the guy you're buying your bulls from is focusing on weaning weights. 2 completely different things. And you could end up with massive cows and maybe easy calving, but completely the wrong cow for your system in 10 years' time. To be able to do this is where we come in. Benchmarking is a great tool to be able to identify where your strengths and weaknesses are in your herd. Setting up goals. So every breeding plan, whether you're commercial or stud, should have short-term and long-term goals. But the ultimate goal of every herd should be profitability. And profitability starts with the number of live calves you have in your felt, a good productive cow that stays in your herd year on year, as well as good performance on farm, as well as in the next step off the farm. That brings us to our next step. So once we've identified our herd goals and knowing what we need, we need to start looking at traits that are profitable to us. So, which is not always easy because, let's be straight, you can't see genetics. So how do we know what genetics we buying? So the guys who bought those bulls that I showed you earlier, and I'm meaning you guys who all stuck up your hands, you're willing to buy the bull, but you don't know what he's doing genetically. And that could be a bit of a warning flag sometimes. But luckily, with modern selection tools like pedigrees, EPVs or EBDs, which is expected progeny differences, which is a prediction tool of how that bull is going to breed and how his progeny would perform, as well as selection indices. It will give us an idea of how the bull is going to perform and if that bull will suit our herd or not. So for interest's sake, let's use an example of calving ease. You've got limited amount of labor, so at calving, and you've got massive herds, big numbers, and you're just losing calves left, right, and center. So we need to look at some calving ease. So when we're looking at calving ease, we need to focus then on calving ease direct, which is how the calf will be born and the predictability if the calf's going to be born unassisted or not. we need to look at birth weight, and then we're going to look at calving ease maternal, which means how are that bull's daughters going to calve? Are they going to need assistance or not? So here, if we look at bull 1 and bull 2, and then the difference. So calving ease direct, bull 2 is 18 plus over 10 plus, which means bull 2 is 8% more likely going to produce calves that will be born unassisted. With a birth weight of +1 and -4.5, which tells us that bull 2 is more likely going to have calves that weigh on approximately 5.5 kgs less than average. And then calving ease maternal, again, bull 2 +18 over +10, with a difference of +8, means that bull 2 is going to more likely have 8% more chance of having daughters that will calve unassisted. So if we look at this whole picture, we can see that bull 2 will be more beneficial to us in terms of calving ease. Everyone knows what this is. Okay, we should all know it because we should all be looking at when we go to a sale ring. When I typically look at this for clients, I have 1 or 2 clients that will often ask me to help and select bulls for them on paper that suits their herds. The first thing that I like to look at is fertility. That is my most important trait I need to look at. Fertility is very lowly heritable but very highly repeatable, which means that in a bad year, a very strong fertile herd will still remain fertile in comparison to a herd that's not fertile, or sub-fertile, I should say. So I look at my intercalving period over here. We always try and get as close to 365 days as possible. I tend to throw our bulls over 400 days, as those bulls tend to breed daughters that will skip. But there are always exceptions to the rule, and if you speak to your seller, if there's a bull you really like and you see that the intercalving is a bit over, then go speak to the seller and ask him what's happening in his herd. Like, why did those cows skip? I mean, for example, now with all the foot and mouth going on in South Africa, we're going to see a lot of skips in this year and possibly next year as well. Okay, so then when I look at his fertility there, I look at the next generation back. So we're not seeing much intercalving, but we are seeing donors. So we know these cows were all donor cows. But what we can see, this cow is 15 years old and she's had 13 calves. So that's quite a good indication on her fertility there. The next thing I'll start looking at is this over here, this performance over here. So we see low birth weight at 34 kgs. Unfortunately, not much over there. But I have noticed that these can be quite tricky to read. Then the next thing is the salary mark. So we know this bull weaned 240 kgs with a post-wean weight of 440. So that's showing good weaning with a good growth rate. Also pay special attention to your accuracies over here. The more progeny the bull has on the ground, the more accurate his EBVs are, and the more likely his progeny will perform according to what's on the paper. Young bulls will have very low accuracies, but as he has more calves on the ground, you'll see the accuracies become stronger, but his EBVs might change. So as per our previous example, we can see with calving ease here, so birth direct, he's on just a little bit above average, so he's a bit lighter than the average. And birth matures, so his daughters will most likely also not give birth to big calves. So it's quite a average bull, which you like. Is anyone seeing any red flags on this slide here? Okay, so for me, my biggest red flag is here. Even though that cow there looks like it's a good cow, we don't know. Here has a red flag, 21 years old, 12 calves. 20 years old, 13 calves. When I spoke to the seller of this bull, and I said, weren't you concerned? And he said, he explained to me, he said he wasn't at the time because it was a new breed, and any good cow they could find, they just flushed.
But what they are starting to see now is the daughters of these cows are starting to show a bit of problem in terms of fertility. Okay, here's another bull. So in comparison to the other bull, again, not quite happy here, but still good intercalving period here on his mother's side. Yeah, you can see he's birth direct, so he was probably a bit of a heavy bull at birth, yet he's a 30 kg bull. So you got to always don't harp on it too strictly, but just keep that in mind. Also here, good weaning weight of 250 kgs. But if you start selecting overboard for weaning weight, you could also run into some trouble. I'll get to that a bit later. Any questions on these two slides? Yeah, we'll carry on. The biggest thing, or the biggest confusion, or the biggest discussion we hear often as well is the milk breeding value, or the milk value. I mean, a good cow weaning a good weaner year on year could have a negative milk. That bull will have a negative milk value. And so it doesn't quite make sense. But if we understand what the milk value actually means, which means it's the portion of the weaning weight that can be attributed to that cow's milk. So if we look at it, sorry guys. Okay, so if we focus down here, so what it means, so if I have a cow or a bull with a milk value of 10 and I have another bull with a milk value of 25, we can see that there's a difference of plus 15. This is telling me that of the second bull, his daughters will most likely wean weaners that are 15 kgs heavier at weaning due to her milk. So it's according to her milking potential, she could potentially weigh weaners heavier than 15 kgs. But understand that milk is very much a direct reflection on environment as well. Here, this table, so this basal metabolism and grazing. So when a cow eats and gets all her energy, the first thing that's going to be where the energy is going to be directed to is going to be to her metabolism, or basically her maintenance requirements, keeping herself alive. Then she might start, if she's got enough energy after that, that might go to her pregnancy or adding on weight if she's not pregnant. Then milk production, and then only estrus or recycling. So this cow will milk to her genetic capability first before she starts cycling again. So if you start breeding cows or looking for cows that are high milk producers, you can start running into a bit of a fertility problem, because those cows will just start cycling later and later and later because all her energy reserves are going into milk production. The next warning is make sure that you're not single trait selecting, meaning you get told by the agent or by the buyers that your weaners are too loud. You need to improve your weaning weights. Now you're going to go off to the sale and you're going to go look for bulls with heavy weaners or a heavy weaning weight himself, because we know if he weans heavy, his progeny are going to wean heavy, and that will solve all my problems. But 5 years down the line, even 10 years down the line, all of a sudden you're raising dinosaurs for cows, because that's what happens. High weaning weights give you big cows. And on the other hand, we also see heifer bulls. How guys will go to a sale and say, I'm looking for a good heifer bull. And that is a bull with a low birth weight to put onto his heifers to make sure his heifers calve easily. Again, now all of a sudden, 5-10 years down the line, we're actually farming with Dexters, because that's what happens. Your smaller calves will wean lighter, and also potentially raise daughters that are smaller framed and narrow pelvises. So that's why it's always important that when you're also looking at your economic traits that are important to you, to make sure that you're looking at other traits that will have direct influence on these traits as well. Okay, so the two hands that I saw went up, will buy this bull. Who would buy this bull? Good, I see no hands. But what if I told you, on paper, this bull was your better bull? That's why it's very important that once you have selected your bulls on paper, to actually go have a look at them. Make sure they match, they look like they breed on paper. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a pony bull or an ox bull that's not really going to do much in your herd. And you spent a lot of money on his genetics, but he's actually just not doing anything. So it's very important. And Martin, and I know there's another speaker, will go into this a lot more detail. But to make sure that he's got good temperament, easy to handle, he's got good strong feet and legs so he can walk around following those cows, whether it's up a mountain or on the flats, and good overall balanced frame and muscle. Because at the end of the day, we're selling kgs. So if we don't have a bull that will put kgs onto our weaners, then we're not really going to make much money, are we? And the most important thing is to make sure that he's gone through a sound fertility testing and he's got the certificate and the vets have all said he's fertile. But then also to make sure that you retest him every year as well, about 6 weeks before breeding. Okay, now we got what we want. We know what we want. We've seen him. We want that bull. How much are we willing to spend on this bull? Often we do see a lot of ego buyers where they just want the biggest, baddest, thickest, most shiniest bull, and they will get that bull even if it bankrupts him. Or on the other spectrum, or the other end of the spectrum, you get the guy that he just needs a bull and his budget is so little, and you know what, that bull is so cheap. I'm just going to take him. At the end of the day, I just want a car, so I'm just going to have him. I will go into the subject a little bit later after lunch, and you guys better bring your math brains because there's some math involved. But basically, just to reiterate on buying, is make sure you don't bring your ego with you, but also don't go buy the cheapest bull that you can find. And make sure that you have a financial strategy in mind, knowing what you can spend and still break even at the end of the day. Okay, now we've bought our bull and we bring him home. And I've heard of some guys that will then take their bull and just shove it into the cows and say, right, buddy, go work. It's very unfair. Ideally, you should be looking at buying a bull about 60 to 90 days before your breeding season. And give the chap a bit of time to calm down, like he's just been chucked to the sale and then he's been looked and poked and prodded and there's other bulls wanting to fight him, and there's people looking at him all the time. And now he's getting thrown in with all these women and he never met them. Now what does he do, So allow him some time to just like catch his bearings, calm down, see where he is, get used to the weather, get used to the terrain a bit. Can you walk here? Yeah, it's cool. And then the next big thing is he's been on hamburgers for the last 3 months. Now you're throwing him into the veld and you say eat, but don't lose weight. And that's also a big mistake we tend to do is we take them off their full feed and we put them on the veld and say go work, and his rumen cannot handle that veld. So we often advise is go find out what your seller's been feeding him, try and get that ration, and over the next 2 weeks, slowly withdraw that ration off and get his rumen time to adapt to the veld. And then you might even need to give him a bit of a production lick throughout the breeding season just to maintain his energy as well. Okay, so I asked Chris if AIing is a bit of a practice in Zambia, and he said not much, but how many of you do AI? Okay. How successful has AI been in your herds financially? Okay. So what we see in South Africa is AI on the stud side. We do see it as a way of bringing in other genetics, because obviously at the end of the day, selling off your genetics, so you need to bring in other genetics. But we're only seeing a success of between 30 and 45% take on one straw in these herds. So as a commercial farmer, and you're spending on average, so 200,000 Rand per 300 cows, it's not quite profitable as you think it might be. It is generally more profitable just buying that bull and putting him in your herd. Where we do see AI being a great tool in getting genetics into your herd is when you have a massive disease risk around your farm. And I'm talking about trach and vibrio. And you're forced to buy those cheap bulls to bring them in to clean out your cows. Then we see AI being a good way of getting genetics in, but on selected cows. You just got to be very clever on which cows you're going to AI. Okay, so now we've gone through it. We've identified we've looked at our herd goals. We know our herd's performing. We know what traits are important to us. We're going to go look for those traits in those bulls using tools like EBDs and progeny and pedigrees and herd indices. We've had a look at those bulls, and those bulls look like the bulls we want. And then we've made sure they're fertile and good scrotum, good all of that. And we're going to manage them well. Keeping all of this in... Oh, sorry, guys. So following all these steps will bring a bull onto our farm that it will give you year on year more calves, better quality, and daughters that will carry on these genes through the generations to follow, giving you a good, profitable herd that is progressing forward with what you need. Any questions?